Well, hey, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. We've got another exciting Q&A. This is our first of 2023 here. So excited to do this. You guys really love these Q&As. And today we're going to talk a lot about fatty liver, liver enzymes. We're going to talk about parasites and a parasite protocol. And these are all questions that we got from YouTube, that we've gotten from Instagram. So if you're not following me on any of these channels, Facebook, Dr. David Jockers, Instagram, as well as YouTube, this is where we're getting a lot of these questions. You can also email them in at info@drjockers.com as well, and it may make one of these Q&A podcasts. So a lot of good stuff to go over, and I've got our superstar health coach, Melissa Knorr, with me today. Melissa, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm glad to get started. Yeah, so it's
Awesome.
the new year. Everyone's focused on their health. So this is a great way to really help people get some questions answered and dial in on what they should focus on. So excited today.
Yep, that's right. And also, guys, if you're dealing with any sort of complex health issues, definitely reach out to somebody like Melissa, a great health coach that can walk you through really understanding what the root cause factors are in any sort of health condition you're dealing with. Run labs if necessary, analyze at labs that you may have already had, and give you protocols that will help you bring you back to balance and support your health. So Melissa's awesome. You can find her. Melissa@drjockers.com is her email, and you can also find her on our website as well. And so with that said, Melissa, let's go ahead and get started with our first question here.
Okay, great. So we're going to start with Mary, and this question came from Instagram. So Mary wants to know what do you do for fatty liver and elevated liver enzymes? What causes this, and what nutrition and supplements help? And this is such an important question because more and more people have fatty liver, and I'm even seeing a lot of children with fatty liver, which is incredibly sad to me. So glad that she asked this so we can really share a lot of great information on fatty liver.
For sure. And fatty liver is a growing condition. It used to really primarily be with alcoholics, and there's a form where somebody is, obviously over consuming alcohol, they develop one form of fatty liver disease. But fatty liver disease today, we have something called non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, NAFL. And with that condition, it can be a number of different factors. One thing certainly could be an infection that gets into the liver. Viral infections, hepatitis, things like that can also be related to parasites. We're going to talk more about that as we go on, but those can drive up inflammation that damages the liver enzymes, damages the liver cells, which then spill out liver enzymes, and we'll have elevated liver enzymes in the blood. But, really the most common cause is insulin resistance. And that is where, basically the body's no longer responding to insulin. We know insulin is this superhero hormone that comes and pulls sugar out of the bloodstream and puts it into cells. And we want our cells to be very insulin sensitive because sugar is an energy source. Glucose is an energy source. We need to be very responsive to getting glucose out of the bloodstream. Elevated blood glucose is really toxic to the endothelial linings and the epithelial linings of different systems of our body. For example, it damages the blood vessels, right? We have our endothelial lining of our blood vessels. And when we have elevated blood sugar, the sugar molecules will bind to proteins and create advanced glycation end products, or AGEs, that create a tremendous amount of oxidative stress against that endothelial lining of the blood vessels and end up causing plaque formation, which ends up leading to things like heart disease, high blood pressure, damages the kidneys, damages the nerve endings. You think about somebody with uncontrolled diabetes, they have peripheral neuropathy, they have optic neuritis, where the nerves around their eyes, basically that help control their eyes, become damaged and they go blind. So insulin, its job is to make sure that doesn't happen, to get the sugar out of the bloodstream into the cells. It also brings nutrients like magnesium into the cell. And so we want our cells very responsive to that. When we are no longer responsive, the first cells that kind of lose their natural insulin sensitivity are going to be, just our muscle cells, right? Our muscle cells, neurons, different things like that. And then down the road are fat cells. And so what happens is, as we lose insulin sensitivity with our muscle cells, our more active cells, then we start to store more fat, because the fat cells still have a level of insulin sensitivity, So when insulin's elevated, we end up putting more of this glucose into the fat cells, creating more fatty acids. And we can do that on the liver, right? So, and we end up creating fatty liver disease that way. And one of the markers, with fatty liver disease is that you will have elevated liver enzymes because the liver cells themselves are becoming damaged. They're not getting enough oxygen, nutrients, and they become damaged and not able to function as well. We know the liver is absolutely vital for helping our body detoxify, helping deactivate all the different toxins that go through our system. It also makes a tremendous amount of proteins, white blood cells. I mean, it just plays a big role with a lot of different factors throughout our whole body. And as that liver becomes damaged, we no longer are able to do those things as well. And this just increases our toxic burden. And, it's a huge risk factor for cardiovascular disease, for cancer, for neurodegenerative conditions. And so you can live with fatty liver disease, and you can live with it for a certain period of time, but every system of your body, the damage is amplifying every day that you're living with fatty liver disease. So really, really key that we do work on strategies to help improve liver health. And Melissa, why don't you start with some of those strategies?
Yeah, so always the most important thing to me is looking at the diet. So we've got to take out any foods that are contributing to fatty liver. And, one thing I want to share, you mentioned elevated liver enzymes. Well, it's really important when you look at your lab work first to make sure you're in the functional range. So if you start getting over 26, then that's a sign you're headed towards fatty liver. So you really want to implement some of these strategies to make sure you avoid that. And so things you want to avoid: foods, processed foods, the same strategies we're going to talk about for liver are good for so many other things. You probably hear us repeat them a lot, but they do. So it's important to avoid the processed foods, the refined sugars, the fructose in the diet. So high fructose corn syrup, unfortunately, is still in the food supply. So really start to read your labels, make sure you're avoiding that. We mentioned alcohol, but like Dr. Jockers said, a lot of the non-alcoholic fatty liver is what we're seeing more higher levels of. So the seed oils, things like corn, canola, really want to avoid that. It's really hard to avoid that if you eat out. So something to keep in mind. And then conventionally raised animal products. So those are full of toxins. And if your liver is struggling, you're already having a hard time detoxifying because your liver is the workhorse of your body. So really important if your liver is struggling, to avoid extra toxins, and conventional animal products are very high in those toxins. GMOs, non-organic foods, especially the Dirty Dozen. The Environmental Working Group puts out a list of the Dirty Dozen. So these are the foods highest in pesticides. Critical to avoid those foods, and if you're going to eat them, they're healthy foods, so we want you to eat them, but you really need to buy those organic. So spend the extra money on buying those organic. Artificial sweeteners, again, extremely toxic. So the diet sodas are full of aspartame, very toxic. So those are some of the foods that we definitely want to avoid. And then we want to include all the non-inflammatory foods. So non-starchy vegetables, green vegetables. I really encourage my clients, let that be the majority of every meal, those healthy, non-starchy vegetables, and then add in some clean protein, grass-fed meats, pastured chicken. Eggs are fabulous. Make sure you're getting the pastured eggs. You can tell the difference with the dark yolk. You always know that that's a good egg because it's a lot darker than the conventional egg. And then healthy fats like avocados, olive oil, those are great to add. You can squeeze some lemon and lime or apple cider vinegar over your meal. That really helps with bile flow and supports the liver. And then bone broth, garlic, onions, just naming off a few foods. All of these are very good for liver health.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to those liver enzymes, yep. So the key liver enzymes there are ALT, AST, GGT, and alkaline phosphatase. And so if you're looking at your labs, you may see those. And the AST, ALT, GGT, if they're up over 26, like Melissa had mentioned, then we have liver stress that's taking place. And that's kind of the early phases of developing fatty liver disease. And then the alkaline phosphatase, really, if that's up over like 90, 100, we're starting to see inflammation in those areas as well. So we kind of want that somewhere between roughly 60, 70 and, no more than 100 Although that could be a marker also for bone growth. So if you've broken a bone, you're trying to heal a bone, that could also be a factor. Now, going into some of the other great foods, you mentioned a lot of great ones. I always say bitter is good for the liver, right? So bitter herbs, things that have more of an astringent type of flavor profile, those are going to have compounds that are really supportive for the liver. So we think about dandelion or dandelion tea, really great for the liver. Milk thistle. Now, most people are not eating milk thistle. It's a great supplement. You'll see in a lot of different liver formulas. Almost all the liver formulas out there will have things like milk thistle in it. But, and you can eat milk thistle as well. It grows all over the place. And then there's also things like, for example, nettle is another good one that you'll find in teas. Ginger is really common. It's great for liver function. Radishes are really great. Artichokes, fantastic for liver health. So these are all kinds of things that we want to be consuming in our diet. Cilantro, parsley, other bitter, those are other good bitter ones. Arugula is another really good one that makes like a good salad base. Arugula, it's also lower oxalate. It's kind of got a very bitter type flavor, but it's a good bitter flavor, really good for salads. So those are good foods that you want to be consuming. You want to do things like when it comes to supplements, we have a great one called Liver Support. That's fantastic. And that one has got different medicinal mushrooms like cordyceps, reishi, and things like that are super good for liver health. Milk thistle is probably the most well-known herb for liver health. That's amazing. Selenium is really important for liver health. Anything that helps support glutathione, so N-acetylcysteine, which is the major precursor to glutathione production, that's really powerful for liver health. So those would be some of the key things. Alpha lipoic acid also really good for, especially somebody that is already in a state of fatty liver disease, because alpha lipoic acid dramatically improves insulin sensitivity and also helps to protect the liver cells from oxidative damage. So that's another really good one. So those are probably the top things that you want to be doing. And then also, actually, another really good strategy is warm lemon water. And you could even, do a ginger tea and then put in like fresh squeezed lemon in it in the mornings. And that's really good for helping support liver health, helping clear out congested bile. That's powerful there. Also, there's another compound called TUDCA. And I think about this more with kind of congested bile and moving bile through the liver. And so it's more of like a bile flow agent, but also has cross benefit for helping support and helping regenerate liver cells. So that's another great one. We offer a great product called TUDCA Complete that has got TUDCA, it's got milk thistle, and a whole bunch of different compounds to help support liver health as well.
Yeah, that's a great product. It supports, it's got kidney and liver healthy herbs in it. So I love to recommend that product. Yeah. And so, the liver produces bile. So making sure we're supporting good bile flow is important for liver health too. I'm glad you brought that up. What else should we talk? Do you want to continue with
certainly
liver?
exercise, so if we're trying to heal insulin resistance, certainly getting regular exercise, building lean body tissue. So doing some strength training. When you do that, any sort of movement or exercise, and particular like some high intensity movement from time to time, you actually activate the GLUT4 receptors in the cells. And these, they're transporter proteins, but what they do is they almost act like insulin, where they help to pull sugar out of the bloodstream without the need for insulin. And so that helps improve your insulin sensitivity with the muscle cells. And so getting good activity on a regular basis, even if it's just going for a walk once or twice a day, ideally also getting some sort of strength training, really good idea to build lean body tissue. That's going to help your body be more insulin sensitive. The more muscle tissue you have, it's almost like a storage tank for sugar. So your body has to produce less insulin. And you store that sugar in the muscles as well as the liver. We call it glycogen. And that helps improve your insulin sensitivity. So getting good quality movement, good sleep. I mean, these are all the natural, healthy lifestyle things that we talk about. Super important there. But really dialing in the diet, getting some of those supplements are key if you're seeing signs of fatty liver disease.
Yeah, Epsom salt baths would also be great to support detox, as well as castor oil packs. That's another great strategy for fatty liver. So it helps the natural detoxification process. So those are two
Sure.
non-supplement options that people could try.
Yeah, and you can put the castor oil pack right over the liver, helps dilate the bile ducts, and it will help stimulate more healing in those liver cells.
Yeah, awesome. All right, do you want to move on and talk about parasites next?
For sure. Yeah. One last thing with the fatty liver disease, when you have the extra fat on the liver, that's a sign of higher visceral fat in general, which is kind of
Mhm.
fat that is all over your organs, right? And that's the kind of fat that actually chokes out oxygen from getting to major organ systems. And so as you and you'll know, like if you look down, if you're standing and you look down and you can't see your feet, okay, because you have abdominal fat that's in the way, that's a sign that you have a lot of visceral fat. Okay. And for some people, they have a greater genetic tendency to start to develop more of that around the liver than others. But either way, it is a telltale sign that your liver is going to be overwhelmed and your overall system is degenerating. And so very, very important to follow these strategies and to get your body fat down, right? And eliminate that visceral fat. And as you eliminate that visceral fat, your body's going to break down the fat scarring around the liver and start to help regenerate and heal the liver cells.
Right. Awesome. I was actually having a conversation with someone at the gym this morning about that, who, that very thing of the excess fat, and encouraging him to get some comprehensive lab work done. So, all right. So let's go into parasites. So Sherry on YouTube wants to know of a protocol to get rid of parasites. And, it's interesting because we do a lot of stool testing, and parasites are pretty hard to detect. So sometimes they can evade stool testing, but we can get some great information on intestinal health and other things to help support the body getting rid of parasites. But often I do see parasites come up on the stool testing, and they're much more common than you think. You don't have to travel to another country to get parasites. You can get them right here. I think there was one study that said like 85% of the population has parasites. So really something that we should all be aware of. I think doing a parasite cleanse maybe once a quarter, or something like that, depending on the person, can be a great strategy. But so she wants to know specifically about a cleanse. And we have some great articles. One is on a full moon protocol, because parasites are more active during the full moon. So we use a specific protocol. We kind of increase the dosages during the full moon to help the body get rid of parasites. But there's other supplements too that we carry in other protocols. A lot depends on the type, because something like blastocystis can be harder to eradicate. It forms cysts around itself, so we have a specific formula for that. But what would you say, Dr. Jockers?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, really all of us have parasites, and it's just a matter of, are they growing out of balance? Really, our humans have adapted and evolved with being in the presence of these parasites all the time. And so it's not like we ever fully eliminate them, but we should be able to keep them under check. And some of them can be more pathogenic than others. And we want to keep them in balanced with the totality of our microbiome. And when that happens, they actually help prime and strengthen our immune system. But for many people, because of toxicity, because of bad lifestyle habits, because perhaps they drank really bad water in another country, or just bad hygiene, things like that, they may develop an overgrowth of parasites and create a lot of imbalance there. And then we need to trim those down, as part of kind of improving the overall microbiome. And so for sure, doing some sort of a protocol around the full moon tends to be the most effective strategy, because parasites, so basically we have a key neurotransmitter, serotonin. We actually produce more of it in the gut than we have in the brain. But serotonin, we're naturally producing on a regular basis. And then we convert serotonin also into melatonin, and that's our natural sleep hormone. When around the full moon, we have kind of this natural light in the sky, right? So normally at night, especially like during a new moon, it's fully black, right? If you're out in the woods somewhere. When you have a full moon, that's a natural form of light that's now, in the sky at night, of course. And so that light exposure blocks some of the melatonin production, and we end up with elevated serotonin because we're not converting it into melatonin. And the parasites themselves, serotonin really activates them. And they're also nocturnal. So they tend to prefer activity in the evenings when we're resting or sleeping. And so they become more active, and their reproductive cycles become more active around that full moon period of time, as the moon's getting kind of larger in the sky. So let's say like a week before, week after or so. That's kind of be the 2-week period of time during the month where they're going to be more active. So during that period of time, it's really good to hit them with some higher doses of antiparasitic herbs. And there's a lot of different compounds that work really well. One that we often use is something called Mimosa pudica, which is kind of a really sticky type of herb. And so it's very, very sticky. It gets in there, can kind of grab, especially some of the bigger, larger parasites, some of the really small amoebas. It does have compounds in it that, if they eat, can be antiparasitic. But we also like to hit it with a number of other herbs. Clove is very antiparasitic. Neem can be really, really helpful. Let's see, there's one called Vidanya that can be really, really powerful as well. And there's other ones. Black walnut is pretty well studied for being antiparasitic. Wormwood, sweet wormwood can be really helpful. Berberine is another compound that can be helpful. So there's different protocols. I mean, we have a protocol called our full moon protocol that utilizes some of these herbs in different formulations. And then we also combine it with binders. And so we like kind of a systemic binder. So there's certain binders that just sit in the gut, and those can be very, very helpful. Like, for example, activated charcoal gets in the gut, where it acts almost like a glove that's kind of grabbing toxins, grabs them and holds on to them, and then pulls them out with the feces. And that can be really, really, really powerful. However, with parasites or any sort of microbial killing, it's advantageous to have a binder that not only binds in the gut, but can also get out into the bloodstream and help bind any sort of endotoxins that are released. And as parasites are dying, they're going to release different endotoxins that can drive up inflammation in different regions of the body. So we use one called bioactive carbon biotox that is really good for binding endotoxins from microbes, binding for example, aldehydes that are released from a lot of these different microbes, as well as lipopolysaccharides and different things like that drive up inflammation. So we'll use that in conjunction with the herbs, so we don't get any sort of like Herxheimer reaction or cleansing type of unwanted symptoms associated with cleansing, which many people are familiar with. And so it's really key to have the binder on board. And it's really key to also make sure that your drainage pathways are open first, that you're having normal bowel movements, at least going once or twice a day. You're urinating frequently, you're hydrating your body well. We typically want to open up lymphatics as much as possible. And there's herbs that can do that. There's also just natural lifestyle things that you can do to help improve lymphatic function. But we want to make sure the systems of the body, the drainage systems, are all opened up as we start to go after these parasites and start to remove them from the system.
Yeah, awesome. And, I do encourage people to do a stool test. I mean, even if parasites don't show up, or they are, commensal with our bodies, learning more about intestinal health and imbalances in your bacteria and addressing those things can really help to balance everything. So it's all about balance. It's because, like you said, we live with these things. We have good bacteria, we have some bad bacteria. It's the imbalances that create issues. So we want to avoid overgrowth of the more harmful things. So stool testing is great. I'm sure people have figured out by now, a big fan of testing. So like to do that. See if there was anything else I wanted to talk about with that. Making sure you're having good bowel movements too. I mean, you talked some about, using the binder so that you do you bind to the parasites or the pathogens, and they are released through the stool. But I have so many clients with constipation, And that's really a bad sign. And if you're constipated, you're not releasing these things that we're binding to. So if you are on a protocol like the full moon protocol, make sure you're having really good bowel movements every day. That's really critical. And there's articles on different things you can do to help with that, but making sure you're drinking plenty of water. Coffee can stimulate the bowels. The lemon water in the morning is great for that. And then we've got a great product called Oxy Powder that I use quite a bit with my clients with constipation. And it's basically just a special form of magnesium. So it's not habit forming, and it can really help people. You can either use it more as a cleanse or just take it a lower amount just to help you have good bowel movements daily. But if you are constipated, you need to find out why. Look back at, like we do with everything, what's causing it, what's the root of it, so you can address that rather than having to rely on anything for good bowel movements.
Yeah, that's great advice. And yeah, for more information, just look up full moon or parasites on drjockers.com. We have a lot of great articles and content on that can help you learn more.
Okay, great. So Jim on YouTube, hi doctor, I do 16/8 intermittent fasting every day. So that means he's fasting for 16 hours, eating in an 8-hour window. But my blood reading, and I'm assuming he means his blood sugar reading at noon before his first meal, is higher than his morning reading. And that is confusing him. So he only drinks water and black coffee when he wakes up. And I'm getting that information from a lot of my clients too, who are doing fasting, that they will still see elevated blood sugar, and cortisol can be a big part of that. So and also black coffee can raise blood sugar. But do you want to? I know you're the expert in this, so the world expert in intermittent fasting and other fasting techniques. So why don't you help Jim?
Yeah, for sure. So for some people, they'll have elevated, and it really just kind of depends on what they mean by elevated. But for some people that have elevated blood sugar upon rising, we call that the dawn phenomenon, where they get an elevation in cortisol, which kind of normally the first 2 hours or so of waking is kind of the highest amount of cortisol that our body produces. And so basically, you're going to notice one of the effects of cortisol, it's called a glucocorticoid, because it elevates glucose, right? So it to kind of help us, and that actually gives us wakefulness in the mornings. We should normally have this natural wakefulness. Now, caffeine is something that also elevates cortisol. That's one of the reasons why coffee or any sort of caffeine gives us more wakefulness, right? In general, because it's elevating cortisol. It's also impacting other areas of the brain that have to do with rest, relaxation, things like that, and inhibiting them. But the elevation in cortisol is going to elevate blood sugar. And so if you're drinking coffee throughout the morning, that just may be how your body's responding to that coffee. Now, does it mean that you're having a bad response to the coffee? Does it mean that you're having a bad response to the fasting? Not necessarily. So what I would like to see is what your fasting insulin looks like. And we can compare your glucose and your fasting insulin. There's something called a HOMO-IR score, or your homeostatic insulin resistance score, which has to do with what your glucose level looks like and what your basically your fasting insulin levels look like. And that tells us more or less like how insulin sensitive your body is. So having an elevated blood sugar, let's say it's 100 or 105 or something like that, isn't necessarily bad. Now, if your blood sugar is up over 120, that's certainly an issue. And that's obviously in the pre-diabetic and going into the diabetic stage. And so we definitely need to look at that and look at some other factors with it. But if it's in the 90s, maybe low 100s, I'm not overly concerned with it. Also, you may be doing stressful activities. You may be exercising. You may be going out, taking a walk that may have an impact of increasing your blood sugar. You may be doing really focused concentration work with, whatever you do for a living. That could also have an impact on your blood sugar. So the way that you know that it's not is if you feel very, very good, very mentally alert, very wakeful during your fast, you're not hungry, you don't have cravings, you feel very, very productive, and you feel good during that period of time, that's a sign that your body is doing well, right? That it's also burning fat for fuel. And yes, it may have liberated some of your stored glycogen, right? Because it's not like you ate sugar or you ate something that elevated your blood sugar. It's you're liberating your storage levels of sugar, and that's increasing your blood sugar, but your body also may be burning fat for fuel. And again, the way you know it's burning fat is you can do a 16-8 and you don't have a lot of hunger, cravings, you don't see your energy or your mental health, your focus, your concentration go down while you're doing that fast. So if you feel like you're productive, you're alert, you feel really good, shouldn't be an issue. And so I wouldn't overly concern yourself with it. But if you want to kind of test, you can test out when you're drinking the coffee. From my experience, you actually get better benefits of doing caffeine after waiting roughly 90 to 120 minutes in the morning, right? So you don't actually want to drink caffeinated beverages unless you're doing like a early morning workout, because then it can actually help improve your exercise performance. Outside of that, if you're just kind of going into your day, you want to wait 90 minutes to 2 hours after waking, because that's when you get your highest rise of cortisol. And so if you bring in coffee or caffeine, then you're actually going to blunt that. You're not getting the same, you're not actually getting an advantage, right? If you are, increasing that even more. So you're going to get the advantage after about 2 hours in the morning. That's when you might see a little bit more of a slump or a drop in that cortisol. And that's when it can kind of elevate it up again. So in general, kind of summarize that. If you're feeling good, like when you take caffeine, it should be a performance enhancer. You should notice that you feel really good. You feel like you're able to concentrate better, focus better. If you're exercising, your exercise performance is better. Whatever you're doing, you should be able to perform better. If you notice within, let's say, a few hours of drinking the caffeine that you have more cravings, you're fatigued, you're tired, you feel irritable, you have depression, sadness, whatever it is, that's just not normal for the circumstances that you're in. That's a sign that you're not responding well to that coffee. It could be the coffee, it could be the caffeine, right? And your body's ability to metabolize that caffeine, or you may have a sensitivity to it. So that's when you'd want to experiment for sure, taking it out.
Yeah, and coffee is one of those foods that's really important to buy organic. And there's lower acid coffees too. So something to consider in addition. I mean, I love my morning coffee. So I guess the best thing would be to have decaf when you wake up and then wait and have the caffeinated 2 hours later.
Yeah,
So,
what I personally like to do is I like to drink, usually I drink about 3 to 4 cups of herbal tea. So I get the warm beverage before I go to coffee. Cause yeah, I mean, coffee there's just a natural feel good. I mean, most people like the smell, the taste of it. And so before I do any sort of coffee, I drink usually about 4 cups of herbal tea. So I'm getting the warm beverage and I'm also getting the benefits of those herbs without the caffeine going into my system. But yeah, you could do decaf as well, which is very low caffeine as well. So you don't get so then you actually get better performance benefits. And most people notice that they sleep better at night when they drink their coffee about 2 hours after waking.
Okay, great. Well, I do my morning workout pretty early, so I'm going to stick with the caffeine early, but great ideas for people. And everyone's different. We're all individual. That's why it's great to work with a coach, because we can really tailor everything to you and your life and your circumstances. So again, encourage you to reach out to one of our health coaches. We've got 3, including myself, and I'd love to help you. But so speaking of sleep, let's talk more about that. Let's see who this was. Lisa on Instagram. And she would like to know, what are the best herbs and supplements to improve sleep quality? And, I work with a lot of postmenopausal women, and this is probably the number one complaint is poor sleep, so hormones can definitely play a role in that. But there's a lot of things we can do. And I really have to be on top of all of these things myself to make sure I have good sleep. And she asked about herbs and supplements, but I'd like to just talk for a minute about other things that can help with sleep, like making sure your room is dark, using the blue light blocking glasses 2 hours before you go to bed. It can be really helpful. The temperature is important. So making sure your room's not too warm. I think the 68 degrees is a really great temperature for a lot of people. And then the things you're exercising in the morning for some people can be better, because if they're exercising too late, that can interfere with sleep. Regulating blood sugar. So if people have imbalances of blood sugar and it's kind of going up and down all day, that can really interfere with sleep, because they can have a drop in the middle of the night, which is going to spike cortisol and wake them up. So something, just the things we do during the day are really important for sleep. And getting up in the morning, sunlight first thing when you wake up, just to help to reset your circadian rhythm, is really important. And prioritizing sleep. So I have a lot of clients who really don't want to go to bed at night. They don't want the new day to start, so they stay up at night, they watch TV. Or some of my moms, are busy trying to, once the kids are down, get all the laundry done and the dishes done, and so they sacrifice sleep. And I really encourage everyone, you've got to prioritize sleep. It's so critical for so many parts of our health, the brain health, blood sugar, so many different things. And performance, so people that don't sleep, they have brain fog during the day. It affects your neurotransmitters. There's so many things that are affected by poor sleep. So really want to encourage everybody to prioritize it. But Dr. Jockers, why don't you talk about some of the herbs and supplements you recommend for sleep?
Yeah, I'm glad that you went through the sleep hygiene, because that's really the first place to start is, really good sleep hygiene practices. I find that most people are not doing the things that they need to do to set them up for a good night's sleep. I mean, I can't tell you how many clients I've had in the past where I started asking them questions about that, and it turns out they're falling asleep with the TV on or something like that,
Mm-hmm.
And so it's so critical that we have the right sleep hygiene. And then there are certain things that can really support us. Number one thing that I recommend off the bat is magnesium. And the reason why is that most people are just deficient in magnesium. And the more stress we're under, the more we're using up magnesium on a day-to-day basis, and the less insulin sensitive. We've been talking about that concept of insulin resistance and insulin sensitivity. So the less insulin sensitive you are, or the more insulin resistant your body is, the more magnesium you need, because we need insulin sensitivity to bring insulin, like a lock opening a door, basically like a key opening a lock on a door, to get magnesium into the cell. Most people don't realize that. They think insulin is really just about sugar, but also to get the actual benefits of magnesium, we need insulin. We need ourselves to be very sensitive to insulin. So getting magnesium is critical. And if you're not sleeping well, if you've got a racing mind, if you're more prone to anxiety, if you have, like, for example, muscle twitches or muscle cramps, these are all warning signs that you may be magnesium deficient. We see it so commonly in our society. So I recommend a really good form of magnesium. There's a lot of good forms out there. Magnesium glycinate, magnesium citrate are good forms. Magnesium malate is another good form. The form that I like the best for brain, for sleep, is magnesium L-threonate, which is actually the one that's most well-studied for crossing over the blood-brain barrier and having the most impact in your brain. Magnesium really helps calm the brain and improves our stress tolerance. So our ability to handle stress and stay in homeostasis, right? Stay in balance. And so it can be really, really helpful from that perspective. And if you're magnesium sufficient, that should really help calm your body and set your circadian rhythm to where you're naturally able to fall asleep, as long as you're following all those sleep hygiene principles, particularly dimming lights in your house, so your brain doesn't think it's in the middle of the day because you've got all these bright lights on when you're at night, right before you fall asleep. You want kind of this gradual shifting down where the brain says, okay, it is nighttime. I'm not being exposed to these lights. I can produce melatonin. So if you set that up along with getting the right amount of magnesium, for a lot of people, that really works well. I'm also a fan of supplementing with melatonin. And I know there's a lot of controversy when it comes to supplementing with melatonin, because there's a lot of people in the natural health world that have said, well, if you use melatonin, because it's a hormone, if you supplement with it, your body's not going to produce as much. And therefore, you're going to become, in a sense, addicted to it. Okay. But my experience is that that's not true. My experience is that most people, as they age, are just not producing as much as they used to. And that actually supporting melatonin levels can improve deep sleep and REM sleep. And the research says that as well. Now, not everybody responds super well to melatonin. My body, I personally respond very well to it, but there are other people that don't respond well to it. In fact, there is a certain subset of the population, it's a small subset, but they oftentimes will have it, basically taking a melatonin supplement will keep them up, right? It will actually agitate their system. So you kind of have to, it's an experimental thing. And I recommend just kind of seeing what kind of habits that you're noticing that actually, and supplements and things like that actually do improve your sleep. And you can track your sleep. I have an Oura ring, for example, OURA, where I'm actually able to look. I have an app on my phone. I'm able to look at my deep sleep and my REM sleep every night. But before I even got this, I was just kind of cognizant of, oh, do I feel well rested this morning or not? And what did I do the day before that could have potentially, encouraged really good sleep or not? So those are good things to look at. And then from a herbal perspective, some people respond really great to herbs. And you can experiment with those as well. Some of the really good ones are things like valerian root. A lot of these are what we call GABA agonists, meaning GABA is like the brakes in the brain. Glutamate is a neurotransmitter that is involved with cognitive acceleration, our ability to think sharply and quickly and react. And for a lot of people, they have a glutamate to GABA imbalance, and they actually need to support their GABA. We know, for example, progesterone, the hormone progesterone in females, very important for GABA production, right? It helps support GABA levels. And when women go through perimenopause and into menopause, oftentimes their progesterone levels will really all the time, their progesterone levels drop. Sometimes, well, I should say, here's where oftentimes comes in. So all women's progesterone levels drop. Oftentimes they drop a lot further than estrogen, and they create an imbalance there, and that can affect GABA levels, which can affect sleep quality. So GABA supplementation itself, some people respond really well to just taking GABA. Others respond really well with herbs like valerian root, which is a GABA agonist. So it helps support GABA activity in the brain. You have passion flower. That's another really good one. Chamomile. Who hasn't heard of chamomile tea, right? Mm-hmm. And some people love that chamomile tea. It tastes great. And you can also take it in, herbal form, herbal tincture form, or in like a supplemental capsule form as well. So those are some really good ones, right off the bat. Reishi mushroom can also be really helpful. There's a number of them. Catnip can actually be another helpful one. And ashwagandha is also very, very good for calming the brain. It tends to reduce catecholamines, different stress hormones that may be elevated, especially for somebody who has anxiety or for somebody that, was doing some late night work, for example. For a lot of people, even though this is not what we recommend, they have goals after 9 p.m. I always say you shouldn't have goals that you're trying to accomplish after 9 p.m. You should be reading lightly, maybe having light conversation with your spouse or partner or children, but no, intense conversations, and no, serious goals that you're trying to accomplish, because that's not going to allow you to produce the kind of hormones like melatonin that help you sleep well. You're instead going to be producing cortisol, adrenaline, norepinephrine, that give you excitation, dopamine that give you excitation and not allow you to sleep effectively. So ashwagandha can help buffer that. So if you are doing something like that, taking some ashwagandha or taking some GABA or taking, some of these other herbs, valerian, passion flower, can help your body not produce as much of those excitatory neurotransmitters or metabolize and break those down more effectively and get back in balance for good sleep. So those are all good things to do. Also, vitamin B6 can be very helpful as well. That vitamin B6 is key for the and magnesium are very key for converting glutamate into GABA, right? So we talked about magnesium before. If you're magnesium deficient, and B6, if you're B6 deficient, those are very common deficiencies, then you're not going to be able to convert that glutamate into GABA effectively. So you're going to have that racing mind, not be able to put the brakes on it and fall asleep well.
Right. So I know our time's up, but a final thought I'd like to leave people with is I do see anxiety being a huge cause of poor sleep. So things that can help reduce anxiety, and stress management techniques are very helpful. And I have a lot of my clients do things like gratitude journaling before bed, and Epsom salt bath just to relax, and you get the magnesium from the Epsom salts. Prayer, of course. And I love what you said about no goals after 9. I'm going to start using that because, finding time to, that's what I do at night. I mean, I prioritize sleep because I know how important it is, but I use that time later to just relax and have mindless things. My daughter and I will watch a TV show or something like that, something that doesn't stimulate the mind. But definitely the relaxation techniques, walks in nature during the day, things like that to really help reduce stress, because just like prioritizing sleep, stress management is also something that's so critical. And our world is so stressed, and it's something that I work with all of my clients on because everyone has stress. So that would be one last thing I wanted to leave people with. But I'm so glad we did this today. It was awesome.
Absolutely. This has been great, guys. Ready to start out another new year. Really thankful that you've listened this far into the podcast. And, our hope and prayer is that this really helps set you up for the best year yet. And if you need health coaching, if you're out there, you are struggling with your health, or you're somebody that just really wants to optimize your health in general, increase your energy, your mental clarity, hormone balance, lose weight, whatever it is that your goals are, reach out to Melissa. You can email her at melissa@drjockers.com. You can also find her information right on our website under the coaching tab. And she'll be happy to work with you. And she works virtually, so you don't have to come see her. Saves you a lot of travel time, a lot of expense as far as that goes. And you guys can work virtually together. So again, reach out to Melissa if you're looking for health coaching. And if you have other health questions that you think would make good content for these Q&As that we do every single month, you can email us at info@drjockers.com, or you can put up, a post on our YouTube channel or Instagram, Facebook, wherever I'm at, Dr. David Jockers. And then we try to take those and put them into a master list and look for what's going to be good to go through on these Q&As. So thanks so much for supporting us there. And we will see you guys in a future podcast. Everybody be blessed.